All right, so I asked them to dim the lights a little bit, and someone said, "What do you think, you're in a nightclub?" Which was actually a part of my story, so I'll get to that a little later. We have a very difficult task, all of us working on the global water crisis, trying to get people to care about an issue that simply doesn't affect them. So I get to speak to a lot of audiences around the world. I'll give you an example of this. I was in America speaking to 2,000 people, and I had to follow the CEO of a cancer charity. Now, he gets out to begin his talk and stands in front of everyone and says, "Raise your hand if you've had cancer." A bunch of hands go up. Says, "How about if you would have a friend or a loved one with cancer?" Now we're about half the audience, and how about someone that you know? The entire audience has their hand up, and then he begins talking about cancer. Well, if I get up and say, "How many of you have walked 8 hours with 40 pounds of disgusting water on your back?" No hands go up. How about how many of you have watched your child die in your arms of diarrhea? No hands go up. So this is really difficult. And for years, many people in the water sector have been using statistics to try to get people to care. Putting up 100-page white papers on websites. Came across a statistic once that an organization, which I won't name, had put up a bunch of, it was a huge, extensive website. They found that over 70% of the PDFs had not one download. 70% of the content on this huge humanitarian organization was not downloaded once. So this is the old way. If I were to tell you a story about the water crisis, maybe that would move you to think a little differently. Differently than if I just told you 663 million people don't have water, or 900 kids will die today. Who's ever seen 900 kids doing anything? We glaze over at these statistics. 52% of all the disease in the developing world is caused by bad water and lack of toilets. These statistics move no one to action. No one. I'll tell you a story. I was in Ethiopia a couple years ago. It was my 23rd or my 24th time in the country after starting Charity Water. And I was in a really cheap hotel room, $3 or $4 a night hotel room. I'm sitting in the small restaurant, and the owner of the hotel recognized him. He comes out, pulls up a chair, and starts telling me the story. He says, "I'm from a remote village, thousands of people living there without clean water, where I grew up." And he said, once there was this woman who was walking 8 hours with a clay pot on her back with dirty water. And he said, one day, she comes back into my village, but instead of reaching her house, before she reaches the home, she slips and falls, and her pot shatters. And all the water spills out into the dust. He says she doesn't go back for water, but she takes the rope that had the clay pot attached to her back, and she ties it around her neck, she climbs a tree, and she jumps. So we found her body swinging from a tree in our village. And he let that sit, and he said, "The work you're doing here is important." I remember thinking, no way that's true. Tell the international donor a sad story, make us feel great about all the resources we're putting into this area. But it nagged at me. What if it was true? So I wanted to go and see for myself. I flew back to Addis. I flew up to the north to a city called Mekelle. Drove 5 hours, then the road ended. I had to rent this donkey, put my solar backpack and my sleeping mat on the donkey, and then I had to walk 9 hours to reach this village. I get to Maida at the end of the evening. I pitch my tent next to the chief's house, and I start learning about Letakiros Hailu's story. I meet her mother, and her mom vividly recounts the moment when she looked out from her house and she saw them bringing a stretcher, and there was a body covered in a shroud, and she knew that was her daughter. And she began to fling herself around her house. She injured her back, and she walks with a limp today. She said, the crazy thing is, nothing changed with her death. We're all still drinking dirty water. She said, you can go meet her friend that walked with her that day. So I go over 5 houses down. I see Yeshareg. Yeshareg shows me the clay pots and the rope that they used to use. Said, good news, years later, these have actually been replaced by the jerry can, which you're all familiar with. It's lighter. It's more durable. But then she takes me to the edge of the plateau and says, well, our water's all the way at the bottom of this ravine. So then we walk down this treacherous path. We get down, and as if it's not bad enough that you have to walk Then you have to wait, because it takes 30 minutes to get 20 liters of water. And all the women have lined up these jerry cans. The source is just a little trickle coming out of the rock where the community was sharing it with the animals. Over the week, I learned what Leda Kiros was like. She had hopes and dreams for a better future of her village. They took me to the church. I met the priest who gave her ceremony, her funeral. He said over 2,000 people came out. Then they took me to her grave, just this pile of rocks behind the church. And finally, before I left, the community took me and showed me the tree where they found her body. I didn't know this until I lived in this village. She was 13 years old at the time of her death. This is a 13-year-old girl that hung herself because she'd walked for water one too many times. I asked her best friend, I said, why do you think she did it? Her best friend said, I think she was overcome with shame because she had broken a valuable asset for the family, this clay pot. Her mother would go without the water that she needed to cook dinner because of her carelessness, because she had slipped and fallen. And it was too much to face them. I'm pretty sure everybody in this room, everybody watching, agrees that 13-year-old girls should not be tying ropes around their neck and hanging themselves simply because they were born into areas with no clean water. See, we don't respond to statistics and numbers and data and facts. 663 million faceless people living somewhere else. But we do respond to stories if they're true. Let me try this on the other end of the spectrum. Let me try and convince you that we should give everybody clean water and allocate the resources and the energy right now, that it's the most important thing in the world. Let's do that with statistics. We could save 1.5 million kids' lives every year. Every dollar invested, you all know this one, we've been using this for years. Every dollar invested in water and sanitation yields 4 to 8 times to the local economy. It's a good investment. We could save women and girls up to 40 billion hours of walking every year. But again, this doesn't move people. What if I told you another story? What if I told you a story of a woman named Helen Appio? Helen actually got clean water in her village, thanks to an intervention, a very simple hand pump, shallow borehole. Our team was actually visiting Helen at the end of a long day of site visits, and they had not let the community know they were coming. As you know, word travels in Africa fast, so Helen has somehow figured out that there is a visit, and you'll see her here blocking the road. Many of you are familiar with that celebration. It often lasts for hours, as communities will welcome their visitors and bring out the very best they have. A couple hours later, our head of water program sits down with Helen, and she says, hey, Helen, how is your life different now? And Helen begins to tell her the story of 2 jerry cans. She said, you know, before the well was put in my village, I had to walk a long distance, and all I could get was 40 liters of water. But it wasn't enough because I have a husband and I have 2 children. I would make choices every day. What do I do with this water? Do I cook? Do I clean? Do I garden? Do I wash my husband's clothes? Do I keep the school uniforms of my children clean? Do I keep their bodies clean? She said there was never enough water. So she said, I never use the water for myself. As the head of the household, I always put my family first. So she says, now that I have clean water in my village, she says this. She says, now I am beautiful. Our team's a little slow. She said, of course, Helen, you're a beautiful Ugandan woman. She says, no, you don't understand. For the first time in my life, I have enough water to wash my face and my body and my clothes. And I feel beautiful. She had her best dress on that day. Most people don't think that water has the power to restore dignity to a woman. Most people we're talking to, they've taken this for granted their entire life. But it's these stories that can get people to think differently, that can challenge them, that can inspire them to action. We are not creatures of statistic and numbers and data. We are creatures of story. We think in stories. We are moved by stories. We remember stories. I'll tell you just a little bit about mine. I was born in Philadelphia to a middle-class family. Mom and dad were great. They loved each other. When I was 4, there was a carbon monoxide gas leak in my house, and my mother almost died. She didn't die, but she became permanently invalid. Wearing masks connected to oxygen, her immune system was irreparably destroyed after this. And I grew up in a caregiver role, helping to take care of her, helping to take care of my family. I was a good Christian kid. I played piano in the church. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I didn't have sex. Until the age of 18. And then I moved to New York City. Now it was my turn to look after number one. And I got into the nightclub business. If you're going to rebel, you might as well do it in style. And I learned that you could get paid to drink alcohol for free. And if you got the right people inside the right nightclubs, they would spend thousands of dollars drinking. Money we could put into our pockets and go on vacation with. For 10 years, I lived a selfish, decadent, hedonistic lifestyle, serving only myself, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drinking heavily, doing drugs, gambling, pornography, you name a vice, I'd picked it up after 10 years. And then at 28 years old, I realized that if I continued down this path, I was going to die young, and my life would mean nothing. My legacy, my tombstone would read, "Here lies a man who got 1 million people drunk." And I needed to make a radical change. So I sold everything I had. I quit all my vices, came back to a very lost faith and morality. And I wanted to do 1 year of humanitarian service to the poor and see where that led me. I wanted to find the exact opposite of my selfish life and see where it took me. It took me to Liberia, West Africa, right after the 14-year civil war had ended, after Charles Taylor had fled to Nigeria. And I joined a humanitarian mission. It's there that I saw people drinking dirty water for the first time. I saw kids drinking water so dirty from rivers they would throw up on their shirts after drinking it. Saw girls drinking water from swamps with insects in it. Saw kids like John Bosco walking into water to drink and bathe with that I wouldn't give my dog. Saw women digging in the sand, trying to get at water. Met women wading into rivers who were afraid of crocodile attacks as they got water that looked like this. A year turned into 2. I never went back to nightlife, and I wanted to do something about this issue. I wanted to help work to create a world where no one had to drink water like this, simply because of where they were born. No woman, no man, no child. Started Charity Water 10 years ago to try to do something about that. And while my friends were compelled with this idea of a world where everybody had clean water, I also realized there was a big problem. People didn't trust charities. I don't know too much about the climate here in Italy, but in America, Americans don't trust charities. 42% of Americans do not trust charities. 70% of Americans polled thinks charities either waste or badly waste money. So in order to make a huge impact, mobilizing people and raising money for the water crisis, we would have to come up with a new business model. And we did. We started with a clean sheet of paper. And we created an organization where 100% of every donation we would ever take would go directly to fund water projects. A very small group of donors paid for all the overhead and the staff and the flights so that 100% of donations could go purely to the countries that needed them most. Second, we used technology to prove where those donations went. We put all of our photos and GPS up on Google Maps. We started building sensors so donors could actually see real-time data flow of how much water was flowing from a remote Ethiopian village 7 years later. and we tried to tell stories. We told those stories online. We built a huge online community, mobilizing over 2 million people across Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, finding new ways to connect our supporters and celebrate the incredible things they were doing. Water walks, walking across country, sailing, climbing mountains for clean water. We told stories visually. Said to parents, imagine if you had to give your child this, death in a baby bottle. We shot rich people in New York in the same situations as the people we were seeing around the world. What if that was your mother that had to drink water with bone and hair in it? What if your kids went to their private schools with 40 pounds of dirty water on their back? What if your banker friends went to Central Park Pond during their lunch break? Or your children drank what looked like chocolate milk, but was water? We wouldn't allow this for our children. Why was it okay for 663 million other people? As we began to tell these stories, people began to give money and join the movement, and we began to fund thousands and thousands of water projects. We stumbled onto this idea that would be an idea where every single person could make this a part of their story. We said, you know what? What if we got everybody to donate their birthday for clean water? People get stuff on their birthdays that they don't need. Sometimes we get stuff we don't even want. I heard people send a lot of stuff to the Pope. There's probably rooms full with stuff that he doesn't want for his birthday. We thought, what if we could get people to donate their birthday and ask for their age in dollars or euros or pounds? And this idea began to take off. A 6-year-old kid asked everybody for $6 and raised $2,000. A 7-year-old kid in Texas raised over $20,000 with his birthday. 16-year-olds in the middle of the country. 89-year-olds donating their birthday. If you see her mission statement, it's quite profound. She says, I'm turning 89. I'd like to make that possible for more people. Nona was born into privilege. She's lived double the life of so many of the people in the countries that we're all trying to serve together. And if her birthday could allow people to have more birthdays, to live healthy and prosperous lives, then she'd skip the gifts in the party. There was one story that moved a town and then moved a country and then began to spread across the world. 9-year-old Rachel Beckwith had heard me speak, and she was 8 at the time. She was about to turn 9. She goes to her mom and says, I'm canceling my birthday party, and I don't want anything. I just want to raise $300, help a few people get clean water to drink. She raises $220, a little shy of her goal. She's bummed. She says, Mom, I'm going to try harder next year. A couple weeks after her birthday, she's killed in a car crash. It's a 20-car pileup. She's the only fatality. Her local pastor opens up her campaign and says, I'm going to try and get everybody in my church parish to donate $9 for her last wish, her last vision for kids she'd never met thousands of miles away to drink clean water. And the story of Rachel Beckwith and her birthday begins to spread. People in Africa start donating $9 online for Rachel's wish. People in India, people in Southeast Asia. Her $220 campaign, Alive, grew to over $1.2 million. As more than 30,000 strangers were inspired to action by the heart of this little girl. I'll play you this short video. We had the opportunity of taking her mother and her grandparents to Ethiopia on the 1-year anniversary of her death to meet the people that she'd been able to give clean water to.
6 in the morning, and we're about to go see some of Rachel's wells.
I am Richard. I am Rachel's grandfather. I really wish Rachel could be here today because, first of all, Rachel would think that this is probably the neatest thing she'd ever seen in her entire life.
Our community, our church, where we are from, we greatly love Rachel and continue to love her family. And I'm overwhelmed with how greatly you have honored her memory. So please receive my most deepest and heartfelt thanks. You've done us a great honor today, so thank you. Yep.
Rachel developed such a big heart from such a young age that she understood and felt the pain of others on the other side of the world. To give up her birthday present so that other children can improve their lives is the most beautiful gift a person can give.
So it says there that Rachel impacted 37,000 people's lives. What was amazing is when we looked a few years later at her impact, so many people, so many of those strangers that had given to her campaign then went on to donate their birthday and follow this little girl. And they raised another $2 million. Rachel now has helped over 100,000 people get clean water from a $220 campaign that she saw live. These stories speak to values. They speak and they call forth the greatness in people. People want to be like Rachel. They want to have the unselfishness of a child who should want toys and a birthday party, but instead wants clean water for others. Rachel's been joined by a lot of people over the last 10 years, and as the organization just celebrated its 10th anniversary, we've now raised almost $250 million through small gifts like this. Over 1 million people have added their story, added their voice to the movement. And we've been able to fund projects across 24 different countries for 7 million people. about 1% of the current crisis. So we all have a lot of work to do. We'd like that number to be 70 million, not 7 million. And we think the way to continue to bring awareness to this issue, to invite people in, is to tell stories. I'll leave you just with a couple more. Telling stories that both connect people and then invite them in. So many charities use guilt and shame. It doesn't work. Might work to get a temporary donation, but it doesn't work to build a movement. You need to invite people in. You need to inspire them and show them that they really do have something to add to an issue like this, an issue as big and as paralyzing as the global water crisis sounds. I'll tell you just two more. About a year and a half ago, when virtual reality came out, we said, wow, there's going to be a moment in time when we can strap a movie set on people's faces and have their full attention for a short time. What if we could bring them closer to the water crisis? We shot an extraordinary 8-minute film of a 13-year-old girl who gets clean water for the first time in her life. And she only lives about 50 kilometers from where Leta Kiros died. This story ends differently. Her name is Salam. Salam means peace. She lost her mother due to mental illness. She was taking care of her father and her 2 younger siblings, and she was getting dirty water from a swamp. Over 8 minutes, you see Salam's entire life transformed through clean water. And we had this film. We said, how do we use it? We knew that we had 400 people coming in black tie to our gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Said, well, what if we strapped headsets on all 400 of them after dinner? We pressed play. And then 8 minutes later, when the film was done, we asked them for money. People took down the headsets weeping and began to give $2.4 million to transform another 240 villages. The power of one story, a 13-year-old girl, moved only 400 people to change the lives of 240 villages. Just a couple days ago, we launched a new campaign, or actually just a couple hours ago, we launched a new campaign. This is a region in the north of Ethiopia called Tigray, where we've got 5,400 water points. And as we started pushing towards the west, we're trying to just find new ways to connect people. And we found an amazing village living high up on a plateau, a village of 407 people called Adietot. Now, the problem is this looks like Eden in this photo, but it's like this 2 months a year. The minister knows this is the wet season. In the dry season, it looks like this, the other 10 months of the year. The water source for 407 people in Adietot looks like this. Swamps, rivers. Some of them dry up and they have to walk long distances. So we thought, how would we connect people to a village, to individual stories? We went out, we lived in the village for a few weeks, and we told 407 stories. We interviewed all 407 people living in the village. We photographed them. We took videos of every single one, telling 407 individual stories. It was an extraordinary amount of work. And then as people came to the gala this year, we thought, well, what if we gave everyone coming an opportunity just to donate $30 and help their person get clean water? As people came in, they learned about Tedeschi, 70-year-old farmers. Tedeschi's been selling his goats and sheep and cattle to pay for heart medicine for his daughter. We learned about couples that had been married for 30 years with 8 children that were madly in love. We learned about this little boy, Danelle, who said, I want to be a driver when I grow up, and I want to drive every road in the world. And Barakesh, who was expecting her first child, wasn't sure if it was a boy or a girl, although she thought God had given her a boy. And all she wanted was clean water for her child. We brought these stories into the Metropolitan Museum, and as people came in black tie, they were matched up one for one on an iPad. And they spent time experiencing their person. We matched pregnant women up at the gala with pregnant women in the village. We matched elders at the gala with elders in the village. Couples with couples. And then we asked them for $30. And I'll play you a short video of what happened and then end. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the 11th annual Charity Ball.
Day by day, hope fades away, and then we know that there is pain within. We cannot medicate.
The community may not be gathering around this toilet break at 6 a.m. to see what you have just done for them. Please open up the satellite feed to Ethiopia.
Man, I would like to say that I wish I was there with you tonight, but there is no place in the world that I would rather be in this moment. I am standing in the middle of Adi Etot. All of these people have skipped their morning chores and responsibilities to come be part of this moment.
Okay, guys, that raised $3.2 million, and we've just launched that campaign online. So everyone can go and meet the 407 people in Adi Etot, take a quiz, get matched up, and tens of thousands of people have done it in the last few hours. Thanks so much. As you guys go out, think about telling stories that matter, that help people.